falsely accused by my stepsister, disowned by my family, and left to start over. Now the truth is out and her lies are finally exposed. My stepsister Jade, who was only 2 years older than me, decided to accuse me of something really awful, like life-ruining kind of awful. I'm talking about the kind of thing that can tear up families and make people look at you like you're scum. It's still hard for me to even say it, but she accused me of assaulting her. Not just a little rumor or something she told someone quietly. It was a full-on calculated accusation. The worst part? My parents who raised me, who I thought knew me better than anyone, actually believed her. Let me back up a bit. Jade was my dad's stepdaughter from his second marriage, and she came into my life when I was about 10. At first, things were fine. We were just kids, stuck in this weird family mashup. But as we got older, things changed. Jade was always really needy, always wanting attention and help, especially from my dad and her mom, and they were way too willing to give it to her. I just kind of did my own thing and kept out of it because honestly, I didn't want to be involved in her drama. She and her mom would fight a lot, usually about money or school. Jade had all these big dreams about going to grad school and doing something impressive. But her mom wasn't exactly thrilled about footing the bill forever. They had a nasty argument about it once, and I remember Jade coming over to my mom, crying, saying she felt abandoned and unsupported. My mom comforted her, saying she understood, but honestly, I thought it was over the top. Jade's mom wasn't cutting her off or anything. She just wanted her to start paying her own way. I kind of agreed, but of course I kept that opinion to myself, at least until the day that ruined everything. So, here's how that day went down. My parents were out, maybe at some event or visiting friends. I don't remember exactly. I was home alone when Jade showed up at the door, looking absolutely pissed off. She came in without even asking, dropped her bag on the floor and threw herself on the couch. I didn't want to hear whatever fight she'd had with her mom this time, but she started in anyway. It was the same story as always. Her mom wasn't being understanding, no one believed in her, blah blah blah. I tried to be polite and listen, but I just couldn't hold my tongue this time. I told her, look, maybe your mom's right. She's done a lot for you, and if you want to keep going with school, maybe it's time you start supporting yourself a little. Honestly, I was as gentle as I could be, but she did not take it well. She looked at me like I had just insulted her entire existence. I could practically feel the anger radiating off her. She snapped back, calling me a spoiled brat who didn't understand how hard it was for her and how privileged I was. Which is honestly laughable because we grew up in the same house with the same parents. There was no privileged anything, we both just had to make do. But in her mind, I guess I was the enemy because I didn't immediately side with her. Then she threw this crazy accusation at me. She said something like, "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Well, you're just pathetic, and one day everyone's going to see it." I brushed it off at the time, thinking she was just mad and throwing a tantrum. I told her to calm down, that we could talk about it when she was less emotional, and then I left the room. I wasn't going to sit there and let her trash me for having a different opinion. After she stormed out of the house, I thought that was it. I figured she'd cool off, maybe stay mad for a few days, but eventually it would blow over. That's just how she was right. But the next morning I was woken up by my mom, who looked really upset. She told me that Jade and her mom were downstairs and they needed to talk to me. I was confused but figured it was something to do with Jade's argument with her mom. So, I threw on a shirt and went downstairs, not even remotely prepared for what was coming. Jade was sitting on the couch, head in her hands, her mom's arm around her. My parents were standing nearby, looking absolutely shell-shocked. The whole vibe in the room was tense, like something major had happened, and everyone was waiting for me. I was about to ask what was going on when Jade started crying, saying she couldn't believe what I'd done to her. Her mom was glaring at me, and my dad looked like he was going to faint. I tried to get them to slow down, to tell me what was going on, but Jade just kept saying how I'd crossed a line, and how she was so traumatized. And then she threw it out there, that I had assaulted her. I couldn't even respond, I was that shocked. I just stood there, my mind racing, trying to process what she had just said. Before I could defend myself, her mom was on me, yelling that I was a monster, and that she couldn't believe I'd do something like this. My dad grabbed me by the shoulders and just looked me in the eye. I could see the doubt, the anger, and it broke something inside me. He told me to own up to what I did and apologize for something I didn't even do. I started explaining that Jade was lying, that nothing happened, but nobody was listening to me. Then, in the middle of my parents and her mom freaking out, I got mad. I mean, really mad. I picked up a nearby vase, not even thinking, and smashed it against the wall just to get everyone to stop yelling. It got their attention, but not in a good way. My dad immediately shoved me back, saying I was acting violent, and told me to go to my room. I ended up locked in my room for hours, pacing, fuming, trying to figure out what I was going to do. How could they just believe her without a second thought? I'd never done anything to make them doubt me before. I had no idea what Jade's angle was, but I was sure she was lying. I just didn't know why she'd go to this extreme. That day was the longest day of my life. I stayed in that room until my dad came in and told me Jade and her mom had left, but I knew this wasn't over. The look in his eyes said it all. He thought I was guilty, that his son was some sort of monster. I tried to explain again, but he shut me down, saying that he didn't want to hear any more lies. And just like that, my world started crumbling. The day after that awful accusation, things went downhill faster than I thought was even possible. I thought maybe my parents would cool down, give me a chance to explain things clearly. I thought they'd at least sit down with me, actually talk it out. But that was just me being stupidly hopeful. By morning, any chance of reasoning with them was out the window. I barely slept that night, just staring at my ceiling, replaying every little thing that had happened. I kept thinking that maybe, somehow, this was all a bad dream, and that I'd wake up and things would be normal again. But no. Early the next morning, my dad came into my room, and he had this serious, almost disgusted look on his face. He barely looked at me, just told me to come downstairs and that Jade and her mom were going to resolve things. As soon as I got downstairs, it was the same scene as before, Jade on the couch, looking all broken, her mom beside her, and my parents looking completely crushed. I wanted to scream. It felt like I'd walked into some kind of intervention. But I was the one getting attacked, like I was this villain they all had to deal with. Before I even sat down, my dad launched into this lecture about how Jade was feeling unsafe, and how she couldn't be around me anymore. It was like they had decided on a plan without even letting me speak. Then he dropped it. I was being sent away. I laughed, thinking there was no way he was serious. "You're actually kicking me out over a lie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. But he didn't answer, just looked at me with this cold expression, like he didn't even know who I was anymore. My mom looked away, and I could see she was crying, but she didn't say a word in my defense. I started begging, saying I didn't do anything, that Jade was making this all up, but it was like talking to a wall. Jade sat there, giving me these sad little glances, like she was some kind of victim. And her mom was patting her back, whispering that it was going to be okay. My dad finally cut me off and told me that the only way they could avoid further embarrassment was if I disappeared for a while. They'd already agreed with Jade and her mom that if I left town they wouldn't go to the police. That was the deal, disappear. I asked, "Where am I supposed to go?" That's when they told me about my aunt. Now, my aunt wasn't exactly the warm, welcoming type. She was known in our family as the strict one, and nobody ever spent much time with her if they didn't have to. She lived a few hours away in this quiet little town, pretty much isolated from everyone. I hadn't seen her in years and barely knew her. But that was apparently where I'd be safe, to keep Jade from seeing me and reliving her trauma. When I realized they were dead serious, I was furious. I told them I wasn't going to just let them shove me off to some random relative like I was trash. My dad looked at me real cold and said, "You don't have a choice." Then he dropped the last bomb on me. They were also giving Jade my college fund as part of the settlement. I couldn't even process that. My college fund, all the money my parents had saved up for my future, just handed over to her to keep her quiet. It was like they were paying her off with my life. With everything I'd worked toward, I just stood there, dumbfounded, while they all talked around me like I wasn't even there. At some point, I just stopped talking. I don't even know how long I stood there before I realized my dad was basically waiting for me to pack up and leave. There was no discussion, no room for compromise. They wanted me gone, and that was it. My mom looked like she wanted to say something, but every time I looked at her, she just looked away, like she couldn't handle facing me. With nothing left to say, I went upstairs and started packing my stuff. It felt like I was moving through water, my mind blank. I packed clothes, some books, a few things that were important to me. I didn't know how long I'd be gone, or if I'd even be allowed back, so I grabbed anything I thought I'd want if I was gone for good. I could hear my parents talking downstairs, their voices low, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. For a second, I thought maybe they'd come up, maybe they'd realize how crazy this all was and change their minds. But they didn't. Nobody came. After a few hours, they knocked on my door and told me it was time to go. My aunt had agreed to take me in, and they'd already called her to tell her I was on my way. They didn't even let me say goodbye to anyone. They took my phone, saying that disappearing meant no contact with anyone from my life here. I had no idea how I was going to tell my friends, explain why I just vanished. It didn't matter to them. They told me to pack whatever else I needed and be ready to go in half an hour. I'd never felt so trapped, so helpless in my life. I walked out of the house, carrying my stuff, and I could feel my dad watching me from the doorway, like he was making sure I was actually leaving. My mom was inside somewhere, not even willing to see me off. Jade and her mom had already left, and I remember feeling this strange sense of emptiness, like my whole life had just been erased in one day. The car ride to my aunt's was long and silent. My dad drove, and he didn't say a word the whole time. I think I must have asked him once, maybe twice, if he really believed Jade over me. But he just tightened his grip on the wheel and ignored me. I stared out the window, my mind a mess, and kept wondering what I was supposed to do now. How could I start over from scratch with no support, no plan? When we finally pulled up to my aunt's house, it was like being dropped off at a prison. Her place was small, a bit run down with this old fence around it, and it felt so isolated. I hadn't seen her in years, and now I was supposed to live here in exile, all because of a lie. My dad didn't help me with my bags, didn't even walk me to the door. He just said, "We're doing this for your own good," and left. Standing there, watching him drive away without looking back, I felt this intense anger bubbling up inside me. My own family, the people who were supposed to have my back, had thrown me away like I was some criminal. And for what? To keep Jade happy? To save themselves from embarrassment? I wanted to scream, to cry, to punch something, but I didn't. I just stood there, gripping my bags, feeling completely alone. This was my life now, cut off from everyone I'd ever known, all because of a lie I couldn't defend myself against. I knocked on my aunt's door, and when she opened it, she didn't even smile, just looked me up and down and told me to come in. And that's how I ended up here, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a few bags and the betrayal of my family sitting like a weight in my chest. It was the worst feeling in the world, and I had no idea if it would ever get any better. Settling in with my aunt was rough. I don't think she ever really wanted me there. She didn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. The second I walked in the door, she gave me this tight-lipped look and just pointed down the hallway to this tiny room with barely enough space for a bed and a dresser. She muttered something about how she was doing my parents a favor and that I'd better behave myself. Nice welcome, right? My aunt wasn't mean exactly, just cold. She had her own strict way of doing things, and she didn't like any sort of deviation from that. Meals at 6 p.m. Sharp, no noise after 9, no guests ever. I wasn't allowed to touch the TV, the thermostat, or even use certain shelves in the fridge. She had this whole system, and God help me if I accidentally messed with it. Honestly, it felt like being in a cage. And it wasn't even close to the worst part. The isolation was killer. My aunt lived in this tiny town, practically in the middle of nowhere. There were barely any shops, no social scene, just a few gas stations, and some fast food joints. I didn't know anyone, and I wasn't exactly allowed to keep in touch with people from my old life. My parents made that clear. They'd stripped me of my phone so I didn't have numbers, didn't have emails, nothing. At first, I just sulked around, too pissed off and hurt to do anything productive. I spent most of my days staring out the window, feeling sorry for myself, replaying everything in my head, and trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I mean, I was angry, like deep down rage building in my gut kind of angry. I wanted to scream at my parents, Jade, and everyone else who'd turned their back on me, but I couldn't do anything about it. I was stuck in this weird limbo, trying to figure out what the heck to do next. After a couple of weeks, though, I realized I had to get out of the house, if only to keep from going insane. My aunt made it pretty clear she wasn't interested in providing for me beyond giving me a roof. She'd leave pamphlets for jobs lying around the house, and would make little comments about responsibility and pulling my weight. It was like she was trying to make it so uncomfortable that I'd just get the hint and leave. So, I decided to do the only thing I could, get a job and start saving up to leave. I didn't have many options, especially without a college fund and no connections out here. I applied at a few places, mostly retail and food service, but nothing stuck until I landed a job as a warehouse worker. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. The work was brutal. Hours long, and I'd come home covered in sweat and grime, barely able to lift my arms. But it gave me a reason to leave my aunt's house every day, and it put a little cash in my pocket. So, I stuck with it. The best part? I wasn't alone in my misery. I met a couple of co-workers who were around my age and dealing with their own issues. One guy, Derek, had gotten into some debt and was working double shifts to pay it off. Then there was James, who had just moved to town to escape a family situation that sounded almost as messed up as mine. We were all broke, overworked, and fed up, so we bonded pretty quickly. After a couple of months, we came up with a plan. We'd pool our money, find a cheap apartment, and get out of our crappy living situations. I was all in. Anything was better than staying with my aunt, so we spent weeks scraping together every dollar we could, eating nothing but ramen and dollar store snacks to save up. Finally, we found a rundown little apartment that was barely big enough for the three of us, but it was ours. Moving out felt like getting my freedom back, even if it was just a tiny bit. The place was a dump, but we didn't care. We bought a second-hand couch that was probably older than all of us combined, a cheap table, and a couple of mismatched chairs. It wasn't much, but for the first time in ages, I felt like I could breathe again. Of course, things weren't exactly smooth sailing. Living on your own when you're broke is a grind. We all worked long shifts, rotating between night and day jobs, and most of the time, we'd barely see each other. But the moments when we were all home at the same time, slumped on the couch, sharing a cheap pizza, or complaining about our crappy jobs, made it worth it. We'd rant about our families, our bosses, and everything else that was screwing us over. It was like our own little therapy group. After a few more months, I started realizing I could actually build a life here. I mean, it was nothing like the life I'd planned for myself, but it was something. I got promoted to a supervisor position at the warehouse, which meant a little more money, though not a lot. But with that extra income, I started saving up for things I'd been missing, like a decent phone. Once I had one again, I considered reaching out to people from my old life, but I kept hesitating. Part of me wanted to reconnect, to tell everyone the truth, but another part was still too angry and too hurt to even start those conversations. Instead, I focused on my new life. I signed up for a few night classes at the local community college, just dipping my toe back into the whole education thing. It wasn't my dream school or the degree I'd planned for, but it was something. Plus, it gave me a reason to keep pushing forward, to keep working and saving and trying to make a life that was actually mine, not something I was shoved into by my family's mess. Life was by no means easy, but I found little bits of happiness here and there. Derek and James became more like brothers than roommates, and we helped each other out whenever one of us was struggling. If one of us had a rough day, the other two would bring home snacks or cheap beers. Well, not for me, since I'm off that. We'd sit around, talking about the future, trying to imagine a life that wasn't just getting by day to day. It was like we all needed each other to keep going, to remember there was something better waiting out there. I'd catch myself sometimes, still angry, still thinking about Jade and my family, wondering how they could have just thrown me away like that. But I was finally learning how to push those thoughts aside, at least for a little while. I had my own life now, my own little bubble of people who actually cared about me and didn't treat me like a criminal. For the first time since all this started, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd make it through. Things had finally started to feel manageable. Life wasn't perfect, but I had my own routine, a couple of solid friends. And I was even making a bit of progress in my job and classes. I wasn't exactly happy, but I was surviving, and that was a heck of a lot more than I thought I'd be doing a year ago. Then, one random Tuesday evening, just as I was getting back from work, my phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it, but something told me to check. It was from my dad. I hadn't heard a single word from my family since they dumped me at my aunt's house. I tried to shut them out of my mind, telling myself that I didn't need them, that I was better off without them, but seeing that email hit me like a punch in the gut. I stood there, staring at the screen, wondering if I should even open it. Part of me wanted to delete it on the spot, pretend like they didn't exist, but curiosity won out, and I clicked on it. The message was surprisingly short. My dad said he wanted to reconnect, and that there had been some new developments. He mentioned that Jade had finally come clean about what happened. Just like that. Like it was some small detail. Like she hadn't turned my whole life upside down. My brain was scrambling to make sense of it. Jade had admitted she lied. As I kept reading, the story unfolded. Apparently her boyfriend, someone I didn't know or care about, had recorded her talking about the whole thing. She'd been talking to one of her friends, or maybe him, I don't know, but the point was, she admitted to making everything up. She said she did it because she wanted to teach me a lesson and that I deserved it after I'd put her in her place that day. The whole thing had spiraled out of control faster than she thought, and, by the time she realized how far it had gone, she couldn't back down. The worst part? My dad's tone in the email, like he was almost excusing it. He said she was sorry and that she was dealing with her own issues and didn't realize the impact. I was stunned. She didn't realize the impact? Really? She took my entire life, trashed it, and they were acting like it was just some childish mistake. And my parents, the people who were supposed to know me better than anyone, had believed her without a single doubt. My dad finished off the email by saying he wanted to catch up, and that he hoped I would understand and move forward. Understand and move forward? As if he hadn't abandoned me the second things got tough, as if they hadn't stripped me of everything and shoved me into exile. I was shaking with anger by the time I finished reading. I didn't reply, I couldn't. I just sat there, letting the reality of it all sink in. My friends Derek and James came home and noticed something was off. They asked if I was okay, but I brushed it off at first. I was too worked up, too angry, and I needed to process everything before I could even explain. That night, I barely slept, the whole situation replaying in my mind over and over. All the times I'd pleaded with my parents. All the times they looked at me like I was a monster. It all came rushing back, this time with a new layer of betrayal. The next morning, I told Derek and James everything. I started with the accusation, the abandonment, all the crap with my aunt, the warehouse job, and finally, the email from my dad. They listened without interrupting, their faces turning from shock to anger, as I explained what Jade had done, and how my family had treated me. When I finished, Derek shook his head, looking like he wanted to punch something. So, she just admitted it, and now they're acting like you should just forget it ever happened? He said. Yeah, I replied, trying not to let my voice shake, just like that. Like it was no big deal. James looked at me seriously. You should tell everyone. People need to know the truth. You've been hiding, man. You've let them control your life even after they cut you off. I knew he was right. I'd been living in the shadows, constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid to even reach out to old friends because of what my family might say. I'd been letting them dictate my life, even from a distance. But the thought of facing everyone, explaining what happened, it was terrifying. Still, as I sat there with Derek and James, a plan started forming. Later that week, I drafted a response to my dad's email. I kept it short, just enough to let him know that I was done being their scapegoat. I told him I wasn't interested in moving forward, unless it meant telling the truth to everyone. I needed my family to own up to what they'd done to me. I hit send, and felt this strange mix of relief and anger, like I'd finally broken free, but was still too pissed off to enjoy it. A few days later, I got another email, this time from my mom. She was pleading with me, saying that family matters should stay within the family, and that I didn't need to go public. She begged me to think of Jade and her fragile state. It was ridiculous. They were still putting her feelings above everything else, even after knowing the truth. I showed the email to Derek and James, and they practically pushed me to go through with telling everyone. I needed to clear my name, to reclaim the life that Jade had stolen. That night, I logged onto social media for the first time in years. I'd avoided it, afraid of what people might think. Afraid of all the lies they probably believed. But this time, I wasn't hiding. I posted a long message, explaining everything from start to finish. I told the truth about Jade's accusations, the fallout with my parents, being sent to live with my aunt, and all the struggles I'd faced since then. I didn't hold back. I wanted people to understand what I'd been through, the betrayal, the isolation. I needed them to know that I wasn't the monster my family had painted me to be. Once I hit post, I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. For a moment I regretted it, wondering if I'd made a huge mistake. But then the responses started pouring in, messages from old friends, distant relatives, even people I barely knew, all reaching out with shock and support. People were furious on my behalf, horrified at what Jade had done, and how my family had treated me. It was overwhelming, but it felt like a weight was finally lifting off my shoulders. In the days that followed, the support kept coming. People were finally hearing my side, finally seeing the truth, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't hiding anymore. The days after posting the truth were a mix of chaos and relief. My phone blew up with notifications from old friends, family members, and even a few acquaintances I hadn't talked to in years. People were shocked, furious, supportive, confused. It was all over the place, but it felt good, like people were finally seeing my side for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel like I was drowning in a lie anymore. Some of the messages were from family members who had known something was off but hadn't put it all together until they read my post. A few apologized, saying they were sorry they hadn't reached out sooner, that they'd believed whatever story my parents had fed them. Some relatives even mentioned they'd been told I'd moved away to clear my head after some personal problems. The cover-up had been a lot deeper than I'd realized, and my anger only grew, knowing how much they'd lied just to keep me quiet and make themselves look good. Then there was the other side of it. My parents and Jade's mom were furious. I got emails from them, telling me I'd betrayed the family and ruined Jade's life. They accused me of dragging up old issues just to hurt everyone, and even said I was being cruel for doing it while Jade was struggling. To be honest, reading their messages didn't even faze me anymore. It was the same stuff, over and over, them putting Jade's feelings above everything else. They were so blind to the damage she'd done that they couldn't see how absurd they sounded, defending her when she had literally lied to ruin my life. I decided to block them all. I was done. I'd given them every chance to come clean, to admit they'd been wrong, and instead, they'd doubled down. I finally had control over my life, without them constantly interfering, or making me feel like I was somehow to blame for everything. After everything came out, Jade's life went downhill fast. The support she had from people was gone once the truth spread. Everyone in our hometown knew she'd lied about something that serious just to wreck my life and get her way. It didn't take long for word to reach her friends, teachers, old classmates. Everyone turned their backs on her. People started treating her like she was radioactive, and honestly, I can't say she didn't deserve it. Jade's mom was absolutely horrified. She'd gone along with her daughter's story from the start, believing every word, and now the whole town was looking at her like she'd raised some kind of monster. Eventually, she couldn't take the shame or the fallout. People were telling her outright that they didn't want anything to do with her as long as Jade was in the picture. Her mom tried to smooth things over with apologies here and there, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. People were disgusted. The more everyone found out, the worse it got. Finally, Jade's mom reached her breaking point and disowned her. I think it was a mix of shame and resentment. She probably felt used too. Her own daughter dragging her into this mess, making her look like an enabler to something so awful. It's not easy to come back from that. Jade was left with no one in her corner. I heard that her mom even kicked her out of the house. She was basically alone, stuck dealing with the fallout of her own actions, and no one wanted to help her. With everyone in town shunning her and her own mother cutting ties, Jade had no choice but to leave. She tried to stick around at first, hoping things would blow over, but people wouldn't let it go. Everywhere she went, she'd get stares, whispers, people talking behind her back. She tried to apologize to some people, but they just turned her away. It became clear that she couldn't stay, not if she wanted any shot at a life that didn't involve constant judgment and isolation. Eventually, Jade packed up and left town. I'm not sure where she went, and to be honest, I don't really care. She had her shot, and she chose to ruin my life instead. Now she's the one dealing with the consequences of her lies, and from what I hear, she's completely on her own. With all of that finally behind me, I started focusing on the life I'd built here. Derek and James were there through the whole thing, keeping me grounded and reminding me that I wasn't alone. After years of feeling like I didn't have anyone, it was strange but comforting to realize I had people in my corner. We'd been through so much together in that crappy little apartment, and now that things were settling down, I felt closer to them than ever. Around that time, I started talking to some friends from my old life, who'd reached out after my post. A couple of them had moved to a nearby city and invited me to come visit for a weekend. It was weird at first, like stepping back into a life I'd left behind, but it also felt good. They were genuinely interested in what I'd been doing, asking about my job, my classes, and the friends I'd made. There were no pity looks, no awkwardness. They just seemed happy to have me back. That weekend made me realize Just how much I'd missed having a normal social life, people who knew me from before everything went to heck. It was like a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost was finally falling back into place. The best part was that I could finally be open about everything. No more secrets, no more hiding. My friends got to hear the real story, not the one my family had twisted and spread around.